Hey, Stewart's Chapel, Don Pierson here, and Don Counts. And some of you are going to want to know what in the world is up. Well, I think a demon got into our little videoing and changed my words, because I surely wouldn't make a mistake, not for several days in a row. Anyway, me and Don, we're sitting here trying to figure out. I think this is Wednesday, November the 24th. But I think I gave yesterday's a Tuesday 24th. So one day we'll get corrected. If you stay on track, you'll be fine. November 24th, Wednesday. And we're moving towards the end on the subject of fasting. Matthew chapter 17, verse 21. And some of you right now are saying, wait a second, my Bible goes from verse 20 to verse 22. Well, you probably need to get a new Bible. No, look at the very bottom of your Bible and you will find verse 21 written down at the bottom if you don't have it right between verse 20 and 22. Verse 21 of Matthew chapter 17 says, however, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. Jesus is speaking. Jesus has just healed a boy that has been tormented from a demon, and the disciples had tried to do it while Jesus was up on the Mount of Transfiguration. When Jesus comes down, the Father brings the boy to Jesus. Jesus heals it, and the disciples say, why couldn't we do that? And Jesus says, this kind does not go out but by prayer and fasting. I don't know how many of this kind there are out there, but I will tell you this, if fasting is not a part of your life, you're probably going to end up living with some of this kind that you didn't have to live with, but because you don't practice prayer and fasting, you end up living with. That's basically what Jesus is saying to the disciples. This kind required more of you than others. But anyway, today I want to deal with the subject, why is fasting so neglected or absent in the life of so many Christians? I think one of the reasons is because of ignorance. Just about any time I preached on fasting when I was doing prayer conferences, I would usually have several come up to me and say, I've never heard fasting preached or taught. Well, that's hard for me to believe because the Bible is filled with references to fasting, but generally when we read through them, we don't spend a lot of time on them, and so they probably never really have heard much on prayer and fasting, and even if they did, they were ignorant about it being a part of their life. So ignorance is one of the reasons why fasting is so neglected by today. Not only is it ignorance in the fact of being taught on it, they're misinformed on what fasting would mean. You know, I think I said earlier when we looked through the charts at the various types of fasting that the only prescribed or regular fast of the Jews was a one-day fast, the Day of Atonement. Yet most people today, when I start talking about fasting, they are thinking of 40 days. And I said earlier, 40 days is very, 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 very rare, even in the scriptures and in our life. And so they're misinformed about the days and what it means. They're ignorant of the teaching. They're ignorant and misinformed. Some neglect it because they're just in pure protest. But I will tell you this, those same ones are usually in protest about tithing, and usually don't really have much of a prayer habit either. They're constantly in protest. They live in a state of rebellion. They tell everybody they're God's children, but they don't pray regularly except for when there's a crisis. They don't give regularly. They definitely don't usually tithe, and so they're in protest fasting. Practice. I think practice is another reason why it's neglected. You say, practice? Well, yeah, if it's neglected, then it's not practice. No, what I mean by that, it is so rarely practiced among the believers that that believers worship with. It's very rare that individuals are aware of other Christians, even in their own church, that have a habit of fasting regularly. And so the practice is unknown. They don't have any examples or models to look at. They think it must be a prophet or Jesus or someone much more holy than them. So practice. I think also another reason it's neglected is fear. I think some are afraid of fasting because they're afraid of making the commitment to a 1 day or 2 day or 3 day fast. They're afraid they won't be able to make their yay a yay and will turn it into an A. In other words, they're afraid that if they commit, they won't be able to keep it and they will break it, and so it's neglected. But there's also another reason they're afraid, because they are misinformed and ignorant about what fasting's about. They're afraid of what they're going to do to themselves. Often people say, well, I got medical conditions. Do you think that when Jesus told all the Jews, young and old, over and over again, I can read you passages, to fast, that he didn't know how he had made them? So fear. Misinformed, ignorance, protest, practice, fear. Non-essential. Non-essential. Man, I've heard that stated in so many different ways. That would be like saying to somebody, that would be like somebody saying that giving or tithing is non-essential, or praying is non-essential. They've got this idea that fasting is optional. You remember Matthew chapter 7. When you pray, when you give, they're not optional. It's expected, it's taken for granted. But a lot of people in God's church think it's non-essential, that it's optional. It's not any more than giving or praying is. And probably the one that probably makes my hair stand on end and makes me turn a little red and makes me raise my voice a little bit more is when some Baptist tells me it's not Baptist. And I want to look at them, and basically this is what I would say to them, as I would say to you. So you're telling me that you would rather be more Baptist than biblical. And that's exactly. For you to say that it's not Baptist, basically you have decided that you rather be Baptist than biblical. Well, a long time ago I decided that. I'd rather be biblical, more biblical than anything. And fasting, as I have proven to you and showed to you, is much more a New Testament teaching than it is an Old Testament teaching. It is part of the spiritual disciplines of a growing, mature Christian. There's one other reason why it is neglected, and that is because of Satan. You see, it's interesting that the verse, except this kind does not come out by prayer and fasting, Jesus is literally talking about the removal of a demon, the presence of the enemy. You see, Satan wants it to be neglected in your life. And as every day it goes absent in your life, Satan shouts. You will never see this kind moved without prayer and fasting. You see, Satan delights in the fact that the majority of Christians today are ignorant, in protest, don't practice, afraid of it, misinformed, declaring it's non-essential and that it's non-Baptist. That pleases Satan. One of the main reasons it's neglected today in so many Christians' life is because Satan's had a victory in their life. Love you, Steers Chapel.